Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you're located. Today about the CISSP exam, some contents about it that some people have difficulty with, and we're going to hopefully give you some strategies to make sure that you pass it. So I know that I gave a little bit of background about myself. I've been in the InfoSec space for 20 years. I've spent a lot of time writing on the InfoSec space. I actually wrote one of ISC2's official textbooks, CISSP exam, and you do plan to go into the management track. They're used for CISOs and other senior management. ISC's official book on their CBK for the management ad on the CISSP-ISSMP exam, I'm the editor. So I'm well familiar with the exams, how they're structured, and the kinds of questions that appear, and that's what we're going to talk about today. And of course, I hold several patients as well. So I believe there is a code that is going to be coming out that will give you 25% off of courses. There is also a new course coming out, or new offering, I should say, from Simplilearn that will be available, which is a good CISSP prep. It gives you a mix of experts attend multiple sessions. So pay attention to the Simplilearn website after this particular session. Maybe well the difference between passing or failing, depending on where you're at in terms of your prep. What we're going to cover today, we're going to talk about the CISSP exam. We're going to talk about what you need to know and do in order to take it and pass it. And we'll talk about some of the challenges that people have. So without further ado, let's move on. And this is meant to be more of a discussion than a webinar. Slides, but there'll be a lot more talking per slide about experiences. So first of all, to take the test, you need to pre-register and don't wait to the last minute. You want to pre-register, you need to pay the fee, which is not $599 now in the U.S., which is another reason that you probably want to try to pass it the first time, because each time you take it, you do need to pay the fee. You need to show up on time. You'd be amazed at how many people have made mistakes and not shown up on time. If you get there late enough, you won't be able to take it. You'll forfeit the fee. And you must bring 2 forms of ID. And there are 2 important things to understand here. You need to bring original documents. They need to have signatures. At least one needs to have a photo. And if your name does not match the documents, you need to bring proof, legal proof as to why it doesn't match, or you will not be admitted with those documents. And this seems to if you have someone who changed their name when they got married, they need to bring a marriage certificate, the original. If you have someone who's using a name professionally that is different than the name that appears on their official IDs, you need to bring proof of either a name change or something of that nature. Otherwise, make sure to register with your legal name. In the United States, for example, we have many people who may have foreign-sounding names and therefore at work use a simple English name as a everyday name. If that's not your legal name and it doesn't appear on your ID, you may want to make sure that you use the name that does appear on the ID. This is the list that ISC2 has of things that you can bring that are acceptable. Make sure to bring them. The worst way not to be able to is to come in there prepared and not be able to take it. And that, so you know, the best thing to do is bring something like a passport or a driver's license that's got your signature and a picture, and then something else that's got your signature on it. And nothing that is expired passports are proof of your name. In theory, they're not accepted. Let's talk about the exam. There are 250 questions on the exam. So if you think about 250 questions, you want to answer them, and you're going to want to go over the exam at least once afterwards and check all your answers, that's really not leaving you that much time per question. That's less than 2 minutes to do a question and check it over later on. And the questions are not all that simple. It's important to understand that only 225 of the questions actually count. 10% of the questions on the exam are questions that ISC2 is using to test the question's performance. So before those questions are either chosen to be used or not to be used on future exams, they want to see how people do with them. And the other reason for doing this is that everybody taking the exam is taking an exam that's roughly of the same difficulty. So questions need to be analyzed in terms of how well people perform, etc., for those types as well. We're going to see domains a little bit later on, but what's very important to understand is that the CISSP exam is very different than exams that you took in school. In school, when you take an exam, the teacher typically says the exam will be on the material in the book from page, let's say, 100 to page 200. And for most of our school career, that means that the answer to questions on the exam could be found or easily extrapolated from the material in the book between those pages, or it could be stuff that was taught in class. And in fact, thinking back to high school, people sometimes get upset if there's a question on the exam that wasn't taught in class, and they go to the teacher and say, hey, we never learned that. The ISSP exam, and in fact, all of ISC squared exams don't work that way. They're based on a common body of knowledge. A common body of knowledge is a collection of topics. Theoretically, anything within those topics is fair game on the test. This is one of the reasons that you want to take a course if you're prepared general knowledge, because people who are teaching the courses generally have a good idea of what kinds of stuff are actually on the exam and what types of questions get asked on the exam. Here is that if you just bought one book, even if it's the official ISC squared book, it doesn't mean that every answer to every question is going to be in that book. In fact, it's almost certainly not going to be the case because technology changes, risks change, compliance rules change, all sorts of materials constantly changing, and people create new questions based on this, and they may not be in the book or may not be in the book until the next edition. In fact, ISC squared in the exam, I believe, lists over 100 other materials that are useful in studying for this exam. Now, I don't know anyone who's actually read every single one of them, but the point is that it's a very broad exam, and the body of knowledge that's used encompasses things that may or may not be in any particular material or particular work. And again, that's one of the reasons that courses are so valuable, because the people teaching it have done this over and over and have a good understanding. Two important points about the exam. There is no penalty for incorrect answers. So an important strategy is to answer all 250 questions. You'd be surprised at people who've walked out and said, well, I didn't know the answers to certain things, and I really didn't guess because I had no idea. It always pays. In fact, in most cases, if you've properly prepared and there's a multiple choice of 4 possibilities, narrow it down to less than 4 that could be the correct answer, and your guessing rate will be pretty or something. But there is no penalty, as opposed to things like the old SAT and the like, although that's changing too. There is no partial credit. This is also an important point. So if a question has, as some questions do on the CSSP exam, has multiple correct answers, let's say there are 2 correct answers that you need to put. If you put 1 correct answer, the question is wrong. If you put 2 correct answers and 1 incorrect answer, the question is wrong. It's either completely right or you get no credit for the answer. And in fact, in some of the newer form questions that we'll look at, this becomes an important element. Passing is 700 out of 1,000. Now, that does not mean 70%. Remember, 25 questions, 10% of the questions don't count. And even among the remainder, as I alluded to before, in order to keep the tests that everyone is taking to be roughly equivalent in terms of like, there are certain algorithms that need to be applied in terms of the scoring. But essentially, somewhere around 70 out of 100 or 700 out of 1,000 is going to be the scoring that you're going to need to pass. How you get there is not necessarily exactly 70% of the question. There are 2 forms of questions that appear on the CISSP exam, the multiple choice and the innovative. And I want to spend some time looking at these because I know a lot of people have had issues where they think they know things and they get questions wrong because they don't really understand how multiple choice questions need to be answered on this exam. Right here is a multiple choice question that ISC squared supplies as an example question. Okay, so which one of the following, most is in all capital, security consideration when selecting a new computer facility? A, local law enforcement response times. B, adjacent to competitors' facilities. C, aircraft flight path. D, utility infrastructure. Now, here's the point. You need to select the best answer. It is possible that more than one of these is a correct answer for a particular implementation. In fact, all of these could be important security considerations, right? Could be that the case where for some reason aircraft flight paths are the most important, but you need to pick the best answer. And we'll come back to this question. And it brings me to what I call the color of the sky rule. And the reason I use this when I talk about this type of multiple choice question is that everyone's at different stages of preparing for the CISSP exam. I don't know what answers you may know or not know. So I take this and extrapolate from a very simple case that we all understand, and we all understand since we're children. If someone says to you, what color is the sky? A very simple, basic question. The truth is that the answer to that question is undefined. If the choices were blue, black, gray, or I can't answer it from the question because I don't have enough information, the answer would be the last choice because of many, many things that could to this question. This question is a little bit better phrased. I know that we're talking about the sky on Earth and not the sky, and it's a human and not some sort of infrared camera, but I still don't know whether it's night or day. So if I ask it better and I say, what color is the sky at 6 p.m., I have a better phrased question that I'm more likely to be able to answer correctly. However, even that is problematic because 6 p.m. in New York, it's dark, but 6 p.m. in other parts of the world, it may not be. So perhaps a better phrased question would ask, what color does the sky appear to humans at 6 p.m. in New York City? But even that's a problem. Because right now in January it's dark at 6 p.m., but in July it would be quite light and the sky should appear blue. But even that's not a good question because what if it's raining and it's cloudy in the sky? And the point here is that you could keep refining this essentially ad infinitum with all sorts of exceptions and reasons why the answer shouldn't be obviously, right? What if the people are colorblind? Or what if the people are looking through a red window and the sky is appearing tinted red? Or what if they're blindfolded, right? There are going to be ways to have exceptions going on forever. But the point is there's a step along the way from being undefined to being perfectly defined where we reach a situation where the answer is good and is the best answer. So, for example, in my belief, when we're asked what color does the sky appear to be humans on Earth at 6 p.m. in New York City on July 22nd when there are no clouds in the sky, to me, the answer is blue. And the reason that I believe that would be the best answer is that all the other reasons that need to be, all the other qualifications that we added afterwards are things that could go on forever, but they're really not making the question more practical. They're looking for weird circumstances and unusual things and, exceptions to the rule rather than the rule. The things that we had said earlier, if I had just said what color is the sky to humans on Earth, well, that really is undefined because there are normative ways that it could be gray, it could be blue, it could be black, it could be sunset, it could be all sorts of colors. This is the concept that needs to be applied when you're taking the CISSP exam to a certain extent. The answer does not have to be perfect. In fact, in many, if not most cases, the answer may not be perfect. It may be cases where you could have another answer. The answer to this question is clearly D, utility infrastructure, because in the vast majority of cases, circumstances, that is going to be more important than the other factors. That doesn't mean that the other factors aren't important. It doesn't mean there aren't cases. It may be absolutely critical to be close to local law enforcement and have law enforcement response time, and there may be cases where that's the most important thing, where I really don't care if the data center goes down as long as I always can get law enforcement there because the data is so sensitive, I can't have out, and I have redundancy up to wazoo, and I really don't care if it's going to be a problem, again, theoretically. Okay, but still, what's the best answer? What's the normative response here? And the answer is clearly D. So when you're taking the CSSP exam, one of the things to keep in mind is that if they ask for one answer and it's the best answer, you want to use your experience, but not take your experience of unusual situations and start applying them as general. And this is a very important concept when taking the exam because there will be many for which you may believe multiple answers are correct, and you need to find the best one. A second form of question that appears on the CISSP exam now, and this has been going on, I think, for about 2 years, is what they call the innovative questions. And because the CISSP exam is now computerized, the questions that couldn't be done in the past that now can be done. And these questions are actually very good questions from a testing perspective because they allow with a single question to really check knowledge of multiple things. They're sometimes relatively simple. The question here, which ISU squared supplies, is actually a very simple question if you studied cryptography, but yet it tests that you have rudimentary knowledge of five encryption algorithms, five cryptographic mechanisms. And it's asking a simple question, which are asymmetric? So if you don't know the algorithms at all and you have no knowledge what they are, you're going to have difficulty answering it. But the point here is what we said earlier about no partial credit. You need to drag the possible answers into the box correct. So you're either dragging 1 to 5. And if you drag the wrong item, so then you get no credit. And what that means is if there are 3 correct answers, for example, and you drag 2, the question is wrong. If you drag 4, the question is wrong. You have to drag the right answers, and anything but the right permutations is incorrect. Contrast this, for example, to general multiple choice, and you see that guessing on this is going to be extremely inefficient and difficult. In multiple choice, if you have 4 choices and you know that 3 are wrong, you have a 100% chance of getting the right answer even if you know nothing about the 4th choice. If you eliminate 3, you've got the question right, assuming it's a pick 1. If you know 3 of these and you don't know the remaining 2, the odds of getting the question right are 25% because you don't know whether to drag or not drag either one of the remaining 2. So the odds of guessing this are much smaller. So when it comes to this type of innovative question, has made it that there are going to be many questions on the exam that you really need to know the material well, and not just 1 or 2 items in order to get the question correct, to get even a single question correct. The answer here, of course, is that RSA and El Gamal are, so you would drag those there. There's another form of question that appears which they call the hotspot, and you can see I've actually answered this question. And that would be clicking somewhere on an image to provide an answer. These questions sometimes look a lot harder than they actually are. If you look at this diagram, there's about a dozen places that you could click and highlight something to show where the certificate authority should be placed for a PKI implementation. But the reality is obviously the certificate, if you know anything about PKI, that certificate authority is not going to be in the process of being transmitted. If you look at the screen, it's obviously not some of the data in transit. It's going to be one of the systems. It's not going to be the user or the shopping cart. So there are actually very few possibilities where this could be, even if you are guessing. But the point is that there may be diagrams that you need to utilize. Let's talk about the 8 domains a little bit. One thing that's very important, most people taking this exam, I mean, obviously you're required to have experience before taking the exam, and most people will have experience in several domains, even though I believe the minimum requirement is 2. But even if you do have the experience with the domains, the reality is that you probably have experienced certain aspects of the domain. It's unlikely that you've experienced everything within the common body of knowledge for that particular domain. And it is extremely unlikely that you've had significant experience with all 8 domains, that without studying you're going to do well in this exam. So let's talk about the domains. There used to be more. They've been consolidated down. Okay, domain number 1 is security management. So that deals with things like laws and regulations. There's compliance issues in there, business continuity, affected this, and of course anything related to risk management. So everything related to risk can fall into this domain. It's a very, very broad domain in that regard. There's the second domain is the protection of assets. So securing assets and everything that goes into that. The third domain, I think it's called security engineering. That's talking about engineering and the management of the actual security. The fourth domain on today's CISSP exam is networking. So networking and communications and related security. In my experience, this domain seems to be a lot larger than the other ones in terms of the material there, and it seems, in my experience, but it may change or may have changed and can continuously change, it seems to weigh heavier than some of the others when it comes to questions. So make sure you know it very, very well. Identity and access management, also an area that seems to weigh, and lots of things related to controlling access and the like, is the next domain. If you have a study guide, there should be a lot on this area as well. Security assessments is domain number 6, so that's testing as well. Everything related to assessments and performing them, designing the testing process, etc., analyzing the results. 7 is operations and security related to securing operations and security operations, I guess we should call it. So that includes managing security as it's ongoing, the operation. So when an incident happens, investigations, responding to incidents. There are some relations in this area that are going to be related to continuity and disaster recovery as well. And then the final domain is related to software development. Now, there's an entire separate certification that goes into a lot more detail, the CSSLP, but you do need to know about creating secure software on the CISSP exam as well, because a CISSP may be brought into a software development process in order to implement security, so you need to understand what's involved with that. The important thing here is that if you know one or two domains really well and you don't know the other ones, you can't pass the exam. So since most people taking this exam have probably worked in some areas of information security but not in all 8 of these areas, you really need to learn a lot when you take the test. The purpose of the CISSP exam is to certify people on this common body of knowledge that is broad across many different areas of information security. And it is extremely rare that people at the stage of their career that they're taking this have actually worked in all of these areas. So there's a tremendous amount of learning and studying that needs to take place. And I will point out that the exam guides and the books are good, but courses generally add a lot of value. In fact, I picked up the original version of ISSP's official CISSP exam study guide, and I want to read a quote from this. The authors of this new comprehensive CBK study guide edition have provided an extensive supplement to the CBK review seminars that are designed to help candidates prepare for CISSP certification. This is a book of over 900 pages, and it's really intended to supplement coursework. So that's something to keep in mind. Many people who study and have studied from books in the past study from many books, multiple books. And courses really do simplify that process because the instructors are well aware of what needs to be taught. They understand the question process, the kind of mistakes that people made, some of which we've discussed today, etc. So, keep this in mind. This is a very broad exam. Okay, now we have some questions coming in. Okay, so one question that was asked is it better to focus on 90% of the material and maybe let 10% be not fully known than to try to get 100% knowledge? That's a great question. Part of the problem is that we haven't defined exactly what that 100% is, right? You have a CBK. So, if you said, should I focus on 7 out of 8 domains, I would say no, because you're pretty much guaranteed that there are going to be questions from every domain on the exam. And if you are unfamiliar with, a particular domain and you give up on those questions, you're already starting with a significant number wrong and you put yourself at risk. I would say study it and take the time to learn all 8 domains. Go in there feeling that you really know the stuff pretty well, and then take the exam. For full disclosure, I passed the exam the first time I took it, but there are many people who do not. And I believe that one of the reasons that happens is that people go in there prematurely. They go in when they really don't know all 8 domains very well. They've been working in certain areas. They've been working maybe for 5, 6, 7 years in security, and they've been covering certain areas. They think they know them well, and they don't realize how much they don't know about other areas, and they don't supplement what they do know in the areas that they do know with other aspects of those domains that appear in the CBK. Which of the 8 domains would you consider the one that you need to know forwards and backwards, and which is the base for other domains? Good question. I am not sure that there is one domain. As I said, in my experience, the networking one and to a certain extent the access control one seem to have more material and perhaps more questions, but there's no guarantee of that. And if you don't know the other domains, you're not going to pass the exam just based on knowledge of those 2. So you really do need to study all of them, take the time to do all of them, and could it turn out you know some better than the others? Sure, you probably have more work experience in some than the others, but you really do want to prepare all of them. Someone asked, what's the best way to study if you're new to security besides experience? Any reading materials recommended in courses? So first of all, in order to get a CISSP certification, you do need to have years of experience. You can't get the certification even if you do pass the exam without, I believe it's 5 years now, of work experience in at least 2 of the domains. I think that's the way it's structured right now. So with no experience, you can take the exam, but it's not going to give you a certification. I think you can take it, and they wait for you to get your experience in order to get the credential, but I'm not sure about that. That may have changed over time. But the point of experience is going to be critical, and studying the particular materials. And taking the course is, I think, of course, it's intended to help people with this exam is very valuable. I would supplement it by looking at the official textbook and understanding the material in there. And if there are areas within the book that you are weak, you probably want to look at supplementary materials. Most people I know who have studied from books, as I said, studied from multiple books, and by multiple I don't mean two. They've studied from several to make sure that they covered all areas. Of course, it makes that much easier and probably actually takes less time than studying from multiple. Someone who's trained is telling you, what the type of stuff is from the book that's most likely to be asked, and how it's likely to be asked, etc. Which domains are most important? So, as I mentioned, there are some that seem to weigh heavier in terms of number of questions, but there are also larger domains. So, on a per-page basis, out of the CBK book, I'm not sure that there is one that's more important than the other, but you're not going to pass if you know 3 domains or 4 domains, even if those are the most important. How many drag and drop and how many hotspot questions will be asked? I can't answer that. That's up to ISC squared on a particular exam. So you need to be prepared for all of that. Someone asked about the safe harbor, and which I guess brings up a more general question: what happens as laws change? So the answer is that everything is fair game. If a law changes, obviously on Monday, it's not going to be on the CISSP exam on Tuesday. Could there be a question that refers to it 6 months later on the exam? Certainly could be. It doesn't have to be a textbook from ISC squared to be fair game. And that's the point. Security is constantly changing. The exam is constantly being updated and the like. Someone asked what books I recommend. So I like taking the course. You can look at the new Simplilearn as a new offering, actually, for this CISSP exam to talk about after the course, which lets you talk to actually multiple experts throughout the self-studied, but got some recorded material. I like the official CBK. In addition to that, make sure you get the latest version of it. But even the latest version, again, it's not comprehensive. I've heard people complain, well, hey, I bought the textbook. I knew everything in the textbook, and I failed. First of all, I have no idea that you actually knew everything in the textbook. But even if you did, if you knew everything in the textbook, I suspect perfectly you're going to pass. But there are things that may not be in there, and you may not get every question just from knowing the text. So someone asked if 10 years of software development experience, do you think how long it will take to pass the exam by self-study without direct experience of information security with 10 years of software development experience? I can't tell you that. I don't know your study rate, but I will tell you that you need to have years of security in order to get the certification, and there are many, many areas of security that really aren't related to software development, and even people working in security may not have the experience. If you've been working in network security and communication security your whole life, and I shouldn't say your whole life, your whole career, and you're working on it for 10 years, you may never have dealt with certain compliance-related stuff dealing with reporting. You may have interfaced with access control systems and the like, but you may not understand some of the kinds of access control systems that your organization didn't use. So there are going to be many, many areas of security that you touched, and just relying on experience alone is not going to work for most people. Is there a break during the 6 hours of the exam? So you can take a break if you need the bathroom or something, but the clock does not stop. So if you walk out for half an hour, they escort you out, they check that it's you coming back in, they do something to a biometric check on your hand or something, but that time counts against you. So if you have 250 questions and 6 hours, so if you make it into 5.5 hours, you're going to have less time per question. And many people finish before the 6 hours, but it takes time. Will ISC squared tell you for multiple choice that require more than one answer? The answer is yes. That's one of the reasons you need to pay very close attention to the instructions and to the actual questions. This isn't the kind of questions where what letter is the second letter of the alphabet, A, B, C, D. These questions, reading the question carefully becomes very important. And again, and I stressed before, it's the best answer. So if the question, for example, said, select all of the things that could be important in selecting a data center in the question that we showed on the screen before, that's a very different answer than what is the most important. And the complexity that a lot of people have and the challenge that a lot of people have is finding the best answer. So someone who knows all the material but still has difficulty figuring out what's best is going to have issues on this exam. And that's also a reason you need to really read each choice very carefully, because some people taking exams learn, I guess, as as kids are going through, is that once you've identified a correct answer, you're done. So if I have a correct answer in A and I read it and I know that's correct, I circle it and I can move on. It's not a good test-taking strategy. It may work in certain environments, but it does not work on the CISSP exam because A could be totally correct and B may be more correct. So you really need to focus on the questions that way. Will U.S.-specific laws like HIPAA, Patriot Act, GLBA be asked in detail? So I don't know what in detail means. They are fair game. These types of laws, privacy laws, security laws, compliance laws, and the like, are things that get brought up in the CBK. They also are major European laws that could be brought up. You need to be aware of them. And the reality is, if you're working in security, you need to know these things anyway, because if you're in a major corporation anywhere and you're doing it, you're going to need to be rules here. If you're dealing with Europe, you need to be aware of the rules here. Do you need to know every fine, intricate detail of these laws? Probably not. Do you need to be aware of the laws of them? Yes. Is it best to mark questions for review and move on to get to all 250 questions and then go back? So you do obviously want to answer all 250 questions. There is plenty of time to go through them at least once, assuming you're not disappearing for a very, very long break in the thing. I believe that that you have more questions about as you've answered them than others. You probably do want to note to go back to those questions and spend more time focusing on it. But you must, you got to go through and answer all 250. First of all, because penalty for getting it wrong, so you might as well answer them because it can only help. And secondly, because the odds are pretty good that if you did prepare properly, that even on questions that you don't know the answer to, that you'll probably be able to eliminate one or two answers. So your guessing rate is probably going to be pretty good. Not always, but on many of them, you'll be able to eliminate things. Even the multiple choice one that I showed you before, the one with the drag and drop, let's say you only knew them. So you still have a 25% chance of getting it right. If you don't answer it, you get 0. And that's a question that, it's a drag and drop, which is, are there usually more questions than test knowledge of a list of things in an order, or more than just general knowledge? For example, Orange Book, understand. I'm not sure what this question was. It was submitted about the Orange Book. But what study materials do I recommend to book and take the course, if you ask me, but everybody's different. Someone said that they failed the CISSP exam twice, coming relatively close. I'm not sure if that's I'm aware of that, but how should I prepare if I have failed it twice? So again, first of all, don't feel bad. Many people fail it. If you read the ISSAP squared instructions, they tell you the instructions. If you failed it once, twice, or 3 times, they tell you you can fail it, take it up, etc. So these are not as rare as you might think. So don't feel bad about it. It's all studying, right? You need to prepare for this. As I said, if you haven't taken a course, that's probably a good way, because the people teaching it know what kind of stuff gets asked. You get a feeling for it. I would look at the CBK book, and you may need to spend more time studying. There's a lot of material. It's a very broad exam, and we spoke about some of the techniques to deal with multiple choice questions. Make sure when you're taking practice questions, that you understand the process of selecting the best answer, and really understand the material very well. All domains appear in one single question. Theoretically, when they pick the questions, probably that's not intended, but the reality is that security is all interconnected, so you could have something. Where's the division line, as I mentioned before, on certain things between, the first domain and potentially the 8th domain? Are there things that could encompass both, continuity, disaster planning, regulations, etc.? Yes. So there could be things that you may not, by looking at the question, be able to identify, is this domain A or B, but you know that it's in the CBK, and it's a mix. And in fact, in life and in dealing with professionally, there are going to be many projects you may be involved with in entail multiple domains at the same time. Do I think online courses are good enough to prepare for the exam, assuming other books are used as a supplement? Many people have passed exams that way. Everybody's different, but that's typically a lot less expensive than going to an in-person course, which involves, you can't schedule. So it may be a worthwhile way to start. I've found that the online materials are very, very good. If you look at the Simplilearn package that's coming up for the CSSP exam, there's a lot of access there. You get access to people. You can still ask questions. So that may be a good way to start. finding a course that you got to travel to and sit there, and then you're done, and you don't have access to resources afterwards potentially either. But there are people who will need that to pass. So it depends on the people. Are questions presented in the same order as the listed domains? No. There are 250 questions. There's no specific order to them. Where they come from. They don't tell you which questions count. You just have 250 questions that you need to answer. Can I repeat the name of the book? I had mentioned Sean Harris's book before, but Sean unfortunately passed away a while back, and so I don't know if the book is being updated. It was a great book in its time. I believe it was published by McGraw-Hill. If it's being updated, I'm not sure who's doing it. I haven't looked at that book. ISC² puts out their official CBK book. So, those are two well-known books. Sean's book, I think, sold over 1 million copies over its time, so obviously it was a popular book. It existed well before the ISC² official book came out, but today, there are many, many books on this exam, and I'm not going to endorse any particular author other than mention that there's an official CBK book. Can some questions have information that could help answer other questions? I guess in theory, but I would not count on that. Are there ever any questions about the domain of a question? I guess that means in what domain does something fall in? I've never seen anything like that. Are practice exams similar to the real exam? So they're similar. Obviously, the real questions are not going to end up on practice exams on other sites, but the people who create questions, generally speaking, have some idea of what the exam is like. Typically, they've passed the exam, and if you have multiple people looking at them, you're getting multiple people with experience doing that. I will tell you that I've been invited to help create some of the exams in ISSAP², usually the add-ons to the CISSP, so the AP and the MP exams. But if you write a book and you're creating the official guide to the CBK, you can't then create exam questions. Obviously, that would be, I created the practice exam questions that are in that textbook, so I'm not going to real exam questions based on that. But the flavor of the questions is going to be similar to the exam questions that would exist. So if you can do get a really good score on a practice exam, that's a good indicator if the practice exam was graded correctly, that you're in good shape. If you're not doing well, that's not a good indicator. I should say it's an indicator that things aren't so good. Hands-on experience required. So this brings us to the experience question. Theory pass the exam if they took courses and studied books and memorized and had a great memory. So I guess in theory, but the experience really makes a difference and really helps information. And when you work with something, you get a certain type of knowledge that you may not pick up just from a book. There's a 5-year, I think it is, requirement in order to get the credential, and there's a reason for that. But as I said, it's unlikely that someone has worked in all the domains at the stage of the career that they're taking the exam. So the reality is that pretty much everybody taking the exam for some of the domains is studying them without hands-on work experience. That said, having worked in other areas, they're probably familiar that these areas exist, right? Anybody working with networking security is going to have ideas in a big company, for example, is going to have ideas that there are compliance issues and rules, and probably an interface with access control systems and the like. So you're going to have some experience interacting with other aspects of security, but for a large part of those domains, you're studying it from a textbook and have not yet experienced it. So that's the reality. Is it possible to write and pass in a class? It is possible. It is, in my opinion, a lot easier to pass if you have taken the time to take a course. And there are online courses. As I said, Simplilearn is offering a coupon today, the day of the webinar, for 25% off of its new CISSP package. So if you are looking at doing that, I would sign up while the coupon is still valid. Are there usually more questions about detailed or general topics? So one of the things about the CISSP exam is that it's sometimes described as a mile wide and a foot deep, meaning it covers a huge amount of material, but not in as much detail as other exams would. And it's intended to be very broad because the point of it is that people have an overall knowledge period. I showed you examples of questions that the ISSAP² provided. So the one about the 5 encryption algorithms, it didn't ask about the block size, although I have seen questions like that. It didn't ask the details, but it did make you know which of the 5 were symmetric and which of the 5 were asymmetric. You will see more detail than that on the CISSP exam. There may be things in more detail, but they're not going kind of complexity that you might find on the, when it comes to architecture, for example, that you could find on the ISS when it comes to the management topics on the ISSMP exam. It's certainly not like a product certification exam. It's vendor neutral. It's much, much broader than any of those, and it won't be as detailed. The textbooks and only knew very, very high-level information that were there, you're going to have some challenges with a lot of questions. Someone asked about the code of ethics. You don't need to memorize it, but you do need to know it. And in fact, one of the requirements for getting the CISSP is actually answering a questionnaire and certifying that you're going to adhere to the code of ethics. The questionnaire asks if you've ever committed computer crimes, etc. You don't need to know it by heart, but you need to know the contents. And that is important, and there will typically be some questions related to ethics and laws on the exam. Those do fall within the requirements for the CISSP exam. Can you get certified in any individual domain? So ISB Squared offers a whole bunch of different certifications, and there are other certification bodies that certify. The CISSP and the CISSP certification is sometimes considered the gold standard of information security. You cannot take CISSP exam on a domain or on 2 domains. It's all or nothing. There's the CSSLP exam that is focused on software development and the security of the software development lifecycle and everything related to that. It's a lot more detailed related to software development, but doesn't have some of the other content that the CISSP exam would have. So you have that, and you have other exams from ISB Squared, from other vendors that may focus on specific areas, whether you call them domains or what have you, on specific sections of information security. They're less broad and much more deep, but if you're looking for a general and broad CISSP certification, if you're looking to have those initials after your name, you got to do all the domains. Can you compare the CISSP exam to other certifications? I'm not going to make detailed comparisons. In general, this is one of the well-respected, if not the most respected, certification when it comes to general broad information security. There are obviously vendor certifications, and different people prefer different certifications. The CISSP, to me, represents a very standardized way of testing broad knowledge of information security, so that if somebody has that particular certification and is working in a business and you bring up some aspect of information security in general, that person is going to be aware of it. Someone who took an exam on software development related security may have very little knowledge, for example, about disaster recovery and business continuity. And if you're hiring them as a generalist and they had a CSSLP, for example, they may know less about certain areas, and they may not be able to come up to speed as quickly on those particular areas. They may, but they're not certified in doing so. With the CISSP, we know what we're certifying, right? We know what those people had to understand at a high level, and so if they got assigned to a project in that area, a certain basic level of knowledge already exists.
Stating, are you planning to compile CISSP videos in future covering all the topics? So I will be addressing that as well.
Are you planning to compile CISSP videos in the future covering all the topics and exam questions and answers? Not sure what that means. Simplilearn has a offering, and there is going to be a new offering that's going to be emailed out to people who attend the webinar that actually gives you access to both the online training and to several experts to help prepare you for the exam. There may be videos involved, obviously, and other types of materials. I'm not sure what you meant by compile videos covering all the exam questions, but the course material that exists on the Simplilearn website already has videos that cover the topics that are on there. It's a course to teach you for the exam, but obviously nobody is going to be able to give you the actual exam questions beforehand. Thank you, and have a nice day.